Couple questions. Quite a few questions. Sorry, Bob. Now we're going to have this new Department of Public Service, correct?
Yes.
And this new Department of Public Service, they are in charge of auditing LIPA and auditing PSE&G?
Auditing LIPA.
I believe it's
And PSEG, yes.
Okay.
Auditing, among other things, yes.
All right. And in order to accomplish this, that number one, going to have to hire support staff for the Long Island office. Do you know how many people they're going to have to hire?
Not offhand. You're probably talking about several dozen, I would guess, to perform to perform adequately.
And does that include the auditors?
Yes, includes
Or
everybody.
are they going to go out and hire consultants for auditing?
Well, they could hire from the outside if they wanted to. It's their choice.
And what's going to happen is these auditors, we're going to have to pay salaries, we're going to have to pay benefits, and we're going to have to pay retirement for these couple dozen people, correct?
Well, this is all coming out of the existing 18A assessment, which LIPA is currently, and LIPA customers are currently paying.
Okay.
That's where the funding comes from for the DPS Long Island office.
All right, well, we'll get to that too. And then also what happens now is this new department is also in charge of arbitration. So if a customer dispute occurs, right, so now we're going to have an audit department and we're going to have an arbitration department of this new Department of Public Service, correct?
I don't know that I would call it an arbitration department. They're going to have people who will be able to help resolve customer disputes or problems.
And how many of these people are we going to projected to have?
I don't have any number on that.
And do we know how many arbitrators we project we'll need to have? And again, we're going to have to pay them salaries. We're going to have to pay them benefits. We're going to have to pay them retirement benefits. We're going to have to give them support staff. So that's even going to be bigger. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure what you mean by arbitrators. Will there be a staff? Yes, they will be paid for through the 18A assessment. It will cost Long Island ratepayers nothing more than they're paying today.
Okay.
But remember, we already pay 18A assessments on Long Island.
Okay, I understand that. But what we have is now we have auditors that are going to audit, and we have here customer disputes. We have arbitration that what happens is we're going to pay for that also. And this is something we don't have right now with LIPA.
That's correct.
Okay. So this is an additional bureaucracy we're creating.
Well, if you want oversight, and if you want customers to be able to resolve their disputes with LIPA, and if you want all the things that people have talked about that this bill provides for, then you have to have people to do that, and you have to pay those people.
Okay. Now, if you go to page 3, and you go line 15, this new department, they can make any recommendation that would, they're not allowed to modify the agreement with PSE&G in any way, correct?
No, that's correct.
That's correct.
Backing up for a second, remember that LIPA itself will be significantly reduced in terms of personnel.
Okay.
And so any additional personnel you may have in a DPS office are likely to be fewer than the number of people who will be eliminated from LIPA itself.
Well, let's talk about that. Right now, what happens is under this legislation, LIPA, it says that they will hire the minimum amount of staffing that they will need.
To maintain an efficient operation, yes.
Right, is that true? And the one that decides how many people they need is LIPA. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
So LIPA can actually say that we think our minimum staffing is, we have 100, but we think we need 150. And there's nothing in this bill that would prohibit that, is there?
Well, you know, I think let's remember that all of this comes back down to the accountability issue, to the oversight by those in elected office, including the governor, to the appointments that are made to the LIPA board, all of which will be accountable for adhering to the terms of this legislation and to the contract that is negotiated with PSEG. So I think that if they do not do that, that there are certainly sanctions that are available, including removal of LIPA board members, among others, and intervention by those of us in the legislature or the executive.
Okay, let's go back to the audits. Now, when they do the audits, all right, they will submit a report to LIPA or to PSE&G.
To the public.
And to the public, but PSE&G doesn't have to really act on their audits, do they, under this?
What do you mean by act on their audits?
It's not binding. These are just recommendations.
Well,
And
this legislation provides for the ability to terminate the contract, which is something else that LIPA has never had with any of its contractors. They've had 10-year contracts, first with Keyspam, then with National Grid. They never had a provision like this that's in this bill, which allows for the termination of a contract and which also allows for penalties of up to $10 million for imprudent costs. If PSEG, in this particular case, let's say there's a storm and PSEG spends money after the storm to make repairs and do whatever they have to do, but their costs are imprudent, there will be a review of that, and they can pay up to $10 million as essentially a penalty, and their contracts can be terminated for poor performance. And poor performance includes a range of things. That includes customer satisfaction, for example, a measure of customer satisfaction, as well as their performance in all ways.
And
so this is something brand new that LIPA has never seen before.
And who makes this
Gentlemen, excuse me for one moment. Mr. Morelli.
Yes, sir. Pardon the interruption, gentlemen. I need to call a committee on Ways and Means in the Speaker's conference room. Mr. Farrell is going to lead folks out. If you could call that, Mr. Speaker, I'd appreciate it, and go back to debate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob,
Committee on Ways and Means.
Who makes that determination whether or not, and does it have to be a gross negligence?
No.
All right. Well, let's try something else. If PSE&G decides that they want to put in a rate increase.
They can't.
Oh, wait a minute. Under this contract, PSE&G can put in a rate increase. They would have to submit a report to the department. If you read the legislation, they'd have to submit a report to the Department of Public Service. The rate increase would go into place, and what would happen is the new Department of Public Service would hold a hearing in Suffolk County and in Nassau County, and they would put together a report and submit that to PSE&G, and they would submit it to LIPA, correct?
PSEG doesn't do this. LIPA does. PSEG can't propose rate increases. Only LIPA can. So LIPA can propose a rate increase and go through that process with public hearings and subject to review by the DPS office, but that's not PSEG.
Okay. And, but they could put the rate in, if they put in a rate increase, then what would happen is they'd have the public hearings, but the rate increase would go in place, correct?
They go through the public hearings. In the meantime, their request is reviewed by the DPS Long Island office, which makes recommendations. They could agree with the LIPA proposal. They could disagree with the LIPA proposal. The LIPA board then makes a decision. Let's say they decide to go ahead. If they decide to go ahead and it's different than what DPS recommended, in that case, they have to hold another public hearing at which they must justify why they are proposing to do something different than DPS recommended. And at the end of this whole process, it's still subject to judicial review. So I think that's the hammer you're maybe looking for in terms of somebody else from the outside being able to say, okay, you're complying or you're not complying.
Okay, what I'm looking at right now is, I think it's on page 10. I'm trying to find the section. I have my notes here. And my notes here says, when it comes to a rate increase, the Department of Public Service and LIPA, right, or have no say. The service provider can raise the rates. The new department holds hearings and makes recommendations, but they don't have to take these recommendations.
The LIPA board.
Right. They don't have to take the recommendations.
No, but then that process that I just described follows.
Right, and the rate increase is going into place. And
No, it may not go into place. If they decide to do something different than what the DPS has reviewed and recommended, then they must hold another public hearing where they are required to justify why they are proposing to do something different. And after that process, if they still do it, it's subject to judicial review.
Okay. Okay, now, Bob, on our debt, when is our debt scheduled to be paid off now? On our bonds?
I mean, realistically, I don't know what, the numbers would be but realistically, they've been rolling over their debt over the years. Now, we hope that that's not going to continue to happen in the future, but that's what they've been doing. So I guess theoretically, you could say just about never. But that's also true for privately owned utilities or many large companies. They almost always have some level of debt.
Okay. But in fact, this one here, we're going to be refinancing the debt for a longer period of time. We're going to take some of our debt.
No.
We're not restructuring any debt in this bill right here. The
Yes,
governor is not proposing restructuring debt.
Yes, it is. It's refinancing. The number keeps changing, but probably somewhere around $2 billion of their debt to take advantage of the lower rates. It is not anticipated that they will stretch it out, however, that debt, that amount of debt will expire when it otherwise would have.
Okay. And the trustees that are appointed, we have another board here? Is it another board?
Well, it'll be a new board. The existing board will be done away. Oh, you're talking about for the refinancing?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's another board?
It's a new authority because that new authority, it's a three-member board. They will get a significantly better rate. Remember, LIPA does not have a great bond rating right now. Doing it this way, and it's a one-time refinancing, okay, so they're only going to exist to do this once. We'll get them a significantly better rate and save a lot of money.
Okay, and these trustees, again, the ratepayer is going to pay for any of, so these trustees are also going to need supporting staff, correct, for that year?
I don't really think they need any staff. I mean, I think they'll use the existing, they'll use existing LIPA staff. They're doing a one-time refinancing.
Okay, and these trustees, they have a fiduciary duty to the bond issuers and the creditors, not to the ratepayers, right?
Yeah, as is always the case.
Okay. And now,
you couldn't possibly refinance and do bonds without that provision.
okay. Now, we've also increased, the programs for solar power and different alternative energies in this also. That was part of the agreement that was reached with the governor.
Well,
right?
I wouldn't say increasing. What we're attempting to do is maintain what we have. LIPA has probably among the best energy efficiency and renewables programs of any utility in the state. The original legislation that was given to us did not make any mention of continuing those programs, and so part of what we tried to do during this negotiation process was to make sure that LIPA ratepayers would still have access to programs of comparable quality.
And how much is that costing us? Do you know?
Depends on what the programs are and how many people they serve. It varies.
And now PSE&G, under the original contract with LIPA, stood to make, I think, profits. They were allowed to make, was it 38 million, I think it was?
I don't remember what the original number was.
And wouldn't it be, aren't they projected to make 58 million under this contract?
Nothing in
Profit.
this bill that directs itself to their profit or that contract.
Okay, my time is up for the moment. I may come back.
Thank you, Mr. Graf.